Okay, now we're going to talk about the Americans with Disabilities Act, the ADA. This was not enacted until 1990, many years after the Title VII Act of 1963. And it says that an employer cannot discriminate against an employee because of disability, and if the prospective employee, needs some reasonable accommodations made in order to be able to work at the place of employment, the employer must make reasonable accommodations to account for the disability. So for example, if a guy is in a wheelchair and in order for him to work at your company he needs a desk that is accessible by a wheelchair, that's a reasonable accommodation to expect an employer to provide that employee with a wheelchair accessible desk. If on the other hand it's some kind of a wild, maybe you're on the your business is on the second floor of a building and there's no elevator in that building, and the handicapped person needs a $100,000 elevator put in to get up to the second floor, maybe that's not a request for a reasonable accommodation. Of course, we have a lot of argument about that right now, especially with the crazy stuff that's gone on in the last few years with that Scott Johnson fella suing every small business in California. But that's a different story, and today I don't think we have time to talk about that. Under the ADA, it's a federal law, so it only affects businesses having 15 or more employees, and the business must impact interstate commerce. You must make the reasonable accommodations. A disability is defined, and if you violate this, and your employer violates this, and you want to sue them, you've got to file your complaint first with the EEOC. But the definition of a disability is a physical or mental impairment that substantially limits someone's everyday activities. And a couple of notes about disability. It extends to things that might surprise you. Drug addiction is considered a disability, but only if the person is in recovery. So if someone comes to you and they're a recovering drug addict or a recovering alcoholic, you may have to give them dispensation to go to their AA or NA meetings and make accommodations for them, because drug addiction is considered a disability under the ADA. There are some circumstances where you are not required to hire a disabled person, and one of them is if they are a danger to the other employees. You're not required to hire someone who has seizures that might endanger the other employees. You're just not required to do that. With regard to health, in the past, people with medical disabilities have come to see employers, and the employers have said, well, I'd like to hire you, but I'm not sure that you're physically able to do the job. So I'll tell you what, you go and have a medical examination, and if the doctor says you can do this job, then I will hire you. The legal issue there is, can you require a disabled person to have a medical examination as a condition of employment? And the answer is no. You cannot single out a disabled person and require them to have a medical exam as a condition of employment unless you require that of all job applicants. If the nature of the job people are applying for is one where every applicant has to have a medical exam first, then you can require the disabled person to have a medical exam also. But you cannot single out the disabled person and require them to have a medical exam as a condition of employment. One other note about disabled employees: if you have a company health insurance plan that covers the employees, you must provide health insurance for the disabled person also, even if that's going to make your health insurance premiums go up. You can't discriminate against this disabled person and leave him without health insurance coverage. You've got to cover all of your employees, including the disabled person. Okay, that is it for employment discrimination. I do wish we had time to talk about a bit about how the state of California took the federal disability requirements for businesses and turned it into a monster that killed many California businesses and allowed a guy like Scott Thompson to become a pirate extortionist and sue hundreds of California companies. But I don't think we have time for that in an online class. Look up Scott Thompson on the internet and look up the California state legislators who changed the federal law and made it a monster for small business owners in California.